Humanity always stood apart from the rest of the galaxy, even before they knew half the species that existed beyond their skies. Their world, Earth, was considered one of the most dangerous places any intelligent life could possibly evolve. Many planets in the galaxy were peaceful, calm, and predictable. Their skies were stable, their oceans quiet, and their lands gentle. But Earth was nothing like that. It was a world full of storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, wild animals, freezing winters, burning summers, forests that could catch fire in minutes, oceans that could swallow whole cities, and diseases that could wipe out entire tribes. And yet, somehow, humans not only survived on that violent planet, they adapted, they advanced, and they thrived. To the galaxy, humans were known by one specific nickname, Death. It meant a species that came from a planet designed to kill its own inhabitants every single day. Other species could not imagine living on a world where even the plants could harm you, where insects carried deadly diseases, and where predators bigger than vehicles hunted you. But to humans, all of this was normal. They grew up learning to resist danger, to push through pain, to solve problems, and to fight when needed. That is why the galaxy feared them, not because they were cruel, but because they were shaped by a world far harsher than anything anyone else had ever experienced. When humans first joined the galactic community, every species reacted with caution. Some were excited, curious, even impressed, but many were afraid. They believed humans would bring war, chaos, or domination. They imagined humans as wild, unpredictable, and too aggressive to live among peaceful civilizations. But humanity surprised them. Instead of becoming conquerors, humans became protectors. Instead of attacking weaker species, they defended them. Instead of demanding power, they offered cooperation. Slowly, the galaxy's fear turned into respect. Far across space lived a gentle species called the Virulence. Their planet was beautiful, a world covered in shimmering blue forests that glowed at night and mountains made of crystal-like stone that reflected the sun in 1,000 colors. The Virulence had evolved in a very safe environment. They had no dangerous animals, no extreme weather, no big predators, nothing that threatened their life. Because of this, they grew into a peaceful, artistic, and highly intelligent society. They focused on music, science, medicine, art, and diplomacy. They never needed an army because no one had ever attacked them before. They never learned to fight because they never had to. Their entire culture was built on kindness, cooperation, and harmony. But their peaceful nature also made them vulnerable. The galaxy was not as gentle as their home. Many species were friendly, but some were dangerous, greedy, and hostile. One of these was the Karnax Marauders, a brutal pirate empire known for attacking weak planets, capturing populations, and selling them into slavery. The Karnax were infamous, feared widely, and powerful enough to take control of entire star systems. The Virulence lived on the edge of the galaxy, far from most major powers, and even farther from the protection of stronger allies. They believed their diplomatic agreements would always protect them. They believed no one would harm them because they had never harmed anyone. But the galaxy did not operate on fairness or kindness. The Karnax saw the Virulence as the perfect target, peaceful, wealthy, defenseless. The Virulence sensed danger only when it was almost too late. Their deep space sensors picked up unidentified ships entering their system. At first they hoped it was a trading fleet or explorers, but the moment the ships came closer, their hopes shattered. These ships carried the Karnax symbol, an iron skull surrounded by burning chains. Every species knew this symbol. It meant destruction, it meant slavery, it meant death. The Virulence panicked. They had no army, no warships, and no defense systems capable of fighting. Their entire planetary shield had been designed to stop meteor impacts, not pirate battles. The Virulent Council gathered immediately, their hearts full of fear. They knew that if the Karnax reached the surface, their people would be taken away forever, their cities destroyed, their culture wiped out in a matter of hours. The Council made the desperate decision to send out an SOS message into deep space, a message begging for help from anyone who could hear it. The message was simple but heartbreaking. It described the attack, the danger, and the weakness of the Virulent people. They had no pride left, no shame, only fear and a small spark of hope that someone, somewhere, would help them. They sent the signal to all known frequencies, all alliance networks, all diplomatic lists, and even unknown regions. Then they waited. Across the galaxy, the SOS reached many civilizations. Some species received it with sadness, wishing they could help but knowing they were too far or too weak. Others decided to ignore it because they did not want to be targeted by the Karnax. Some feared the pirates more than they valued the lives of the Virulent. Silence echoed back to the Virulent homeworld. No help came. But galaxies are vast, and signals travel far. After hours of drifting through space, the SOS reached a region controlled by the Terran Federation, the human government. Humans monitored all space frequencies. When the SOS alert flashed across their communication stations, it immediately caught the attention of the Terran Emergency Response Command. The message was played in a quiet room filled with officers. It was emotional, fearful, and raw. It showed the faces of Virulent civilians crying, pleading, and begging for help. It described their situation honestly and helplessly. The humans listening felt something spark inside them, something deep, something instinctive, something that came from their long history of facing danger head-on. Humans did not ignore distress calls. It was in their nature to respond. They understood fear. They understood being alone. They understood danger more than most species ever could. But more importantly, they believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. It was part of human culture, part of their identity. The military officers did not hesitate. The moment the message ended, the commanding officer said only one sentence: "Prepare the fleet." Across the Terran Federation, alarms activated in bases, stations, and command centers. Pilots ran toward their ships. Engineers fueled engines. Soldiers equipped their armor. Massive battle cruisers powered up. The Terran war fleet, known as one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, began to mobilize. Other species often wondered why humans reacted so strongly to distress calls. But humans had a very simple philosophy: if someone needed help, you helped them. It didn't matter if they were allies, strangers, or even former enemies. It didn't matter how far away they were or how dangerous the mission might be. Someone had cried for help, and that was enough. While the fleet prepared, analysts studied the virulent situation. They calculated distance, travel time, and the strength of the enemy. They estimated that if the humans moved immediately, there was still a chance to reach the virulence before total destruction. It would be tight, maybe even impossible. But humans believed in trying, even when the odds were against them. When news of the mobilization reached the Terran public, millions of humans supported the decision. Messages poured in from civilians offering supplies, donations, and even volunteering to join the rescue mission. Humanity stood together, united by a simple idea: no innocent species should be abandoned. Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy watched in shock. No other species had responded to the virulent SOS. No other civilization dared to challenge the Carnax marauders. But humans were different. They had faced extinction-level events, global wars, and unimaginable disasters on their own planet. They were not driven by fear. They were driven by determination. The small spark of hope in the virulent hearts had nearly died. Their cities went silent. Their skies darkened with pirate ships. Their people huddled in shelters, trembling. Children cried, elders prayed, and leaders feared the end of their civilization. They believed no one was coming. They believed they had been forgotten. But deep in space, through the darkness, through light years of emptiness, through danger and uncertainty, something moved a fleet larger and stronger than anything the Virulens had ever seen. The humans were coming. And when humans came, they came with everything. They came with courage, fire, and unstoppable strength. The galaxy had always feared what humans could do in war. But this time they would witness something even more shocking. What humans could do when they chose to save rather than destroy. And that single decision was about to change the future of the entire galaxy. Asterisk. The Virulens had lived their entire lives believing that peace was something permanent, something guaranteed, something that could never be taken away. Their world had always been calm. Their skies were soft shades of blue and purple, filled with gentle floating creatures that glided like paper lanterns. Their cities were built with harmony in mind crystal towers that glowed softly at night, pathways covered in bioluminescent vines, and homes shaped like delicate shells. Every corner of their planet was designed for beauty, for comfort, for simplicity. The idea of war was so distant, so unbelievable, that most Virulens had never even seen a weapon in real life. When the first signal appeared on their long-range scanners, no one thought it was danger. Virulens assumed it was a friendly ship, maybe a merchant vessel or an explorer from another system. The outer rim where they lived was quiet, isolated, and mostly visited by peaceful travelers. So when their sensors detected unknown signatures, the early reaction was curiosity. Scientists gathered to observe the data. Students rushed to look at the holographic displays, and elders discussed what new cultures they might soon welcome. No one even considered the possibility of a threat, but curiosity slowly turned into confusion. The ships approaching were not broadcasting identification signals. In the galaxy, it was a basic rule. Every ship showed its identity, so no one mistook them for pirates. The approaching fleet had its signals locked, encrypted, or perhaps intentionally muted. But Virulen scientists tried to send polite greetings. They got no answer. They tried again. No answer. They attempted to scan the ships, but the readings were hazy, distorted, almost as if the ships carried technology meant to hide their true nature. Small waves of fear began to rise in the hearts of the Virulen Council. The council was made up of wise elders chosen not for their strength, but for their kindness. They had always resolved problems through diplomacy, negotiation, or empathy. But they had never practiced fear management. They had never prepared for something like this. So when the ships came closer and the scanners finally deciphered the symbols on their hulls, the council chambers fell silent. The symbol was unmistakably an iron skull surrounded by burning chains, the mark of the Carnax marauders. Every species in the galaxy knew that symbol. It was the symbol of terror, a warning to all weak civilizations. The Carnax did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They did not spare lives. They invaded, captured, destroyed, and enslaved. They fed off fear, relying on shock and brutality to break their victims before the real battle even began. The Virellans, gentle and peaceful, were the perfect prey. In that moment, the Virellan Council experienced something they had never truly felt before: helplessness. Their world had no defensive army. Their ships were meant for travel, not combat. Their planetary shield could stop debris or meteorites, but not missiles. Their people had no fighting skills because they had never needed to fight. They didn't even have evacuation plans for war, because no one believed war would ever reach them. Chaos spread rapidly across the planet. Information networks broadcast the news. Schools closed, families gathered their children, markets shut down. The glowing forests dimmed as entire communities rushed to their homes. Some cried openly, unable to understand why anyone would want to harm them. Others tried to remain calm, telling themselves that maybe, just maybe, the Karnax would pass by without attacking. But deep inside, everyone knew the truth. Pirates did not travel this far unless they wanted something within hours. The Karnax ships reached orbit around the Virellan homeworld. Their huge metallic bodies looked like floating fortresses, covered in black armor, spikes, and weapons. The Virellan skies darkened as shadows of incoming pirate ships passed above their cities. Panic grew louder. That Virellans were not built for fear. Fear was something new, sharp, and painful to them. The Virellan Council gathered in an emergency meeting. Their projected faces appeared on giant screens across the city, trying to bring calm, but their voices trembled. Their eyes showed fear. Even their glowing skin lost some of its shine. They tried to think of solutions, but there were none. Diplomacy wouldn't work. Appeasement wouldn't work. Running wouldn't work. They were trapped. It was then that the council made the only decision left. They had to send a distress signal. They had never done it before. They had never needed to. Their long-range communication system had only been used for scientific exchanges and cultural messages. But this time, it would carry something far different. Desperation. The message they crafted was simple, emotional, and honest. It explained their peaceful nature, their lack of defenses, their fear, and the imminent destruction facing them. It included video recordings of families huddled in shelters, children crying, elders whispering prayers. When the message was played one final time before transmission, even the technicians in the communications center began to cry. It was painful to send such a message, painful to admit their helplessness. But they had no other option. Once the SOS signal was launched, it spread through the stars like a beacon of fear. It traveled across frequencies, across networks, bouncing from relay station to relay station, reaching out to anyone who might listen. The Virellans gathered in their homes and shelters, waiting, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear them. Hours passed. Silence. The first civilization that received the message was a peaceful species that lived only 2 star systems away. They saw the distress call, felt pity, and immediately held a meeting. But after discussing, they made the painful decision not to intervene. They had no army strong enough to face the Karnax. If they interfered, they would be destroyed next. They chose to protect their own people. They turned off the alert. Another species received the message, one slightly stronger and more advanced. They debated sending a small fleet, but their leaders feared retaliation. They feared what the Karnax would do if they failed to stop them. They feared risking their own borders. So, with heavy hearts, they filed the message away and pretended they never saw it. The distress signal continued to travel. Trading empire picked it up. They sympathized, but they were merchants, not warriors. Their goal was profit, not protection. They whispered among themselves that the Virellans were already lost. They offered a moment of silence and then moved on. The signal reached a diplomatic alliance known for peacekeeping. They watched the message, discussed it professionally, and concluded that by the time they mobilized, the Virellans would already be gone. So they decided to preserve their resources for other emergencies. One by one, civilizations saw the Virellan SOS and turned away, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. No one wanted to be the next victim of the Karnax. No one wanted to face a pirate empire known for brutality. Everyone waited for someone else to act, but no one did. Down on the Virellan homeworld, hope dimmed. Families began to whisper that they may not live to see tomorrow. Elders embraced their children and grandchildren, trying to comfort them even when they themselves were shaking with fear. The skies grew darker as the pirate ships positioned themselves above major cities. The sound of alarms echoed across the glowing valleys. Even the wind seemed to stop, as if holding its breath. The Virellan Council received status updates from every corner of the planet. Their communication officers reported that most nearby civilizations had seen the message but chosen not to respond. The council members looked at each other with hollow eyes. Their fears were confirmed. They were alone. But just when almost all hope had drained away, something changed. A young communication officer noticed that the SOS signal had reached a distant region far beyond the usual receivers. At first he thought it was a malfunction. The distance was extreme, the time delay massive, and the probability of getting help almost non-existent. But the officer checked again, and the readings were real. The signal had entered Terran space. Terran space was enormous, militarily powerful, and governed by the humans. The Virellans knew very little about humans. Mostly rumors, stories that described them as frightening, unpredictable, and incredibly strong. Stories that said humans fought like storms and survived things no other species could. Stories that said humans sometimes rushed into danger even when they had nothing to gain. But no one knew how much of that was true. No Virellan had ever met a human. No human had ever visited their world. The Virellans had no alliance, no treaty, no trade agreement, nothing that bound humanity to them. So even when the message entered Terran space, the Council did not hope. Why would mighty Deathworlders help a peaceful, unknown species on the edge of the galaxy? They sat in silence, trembling, waiting, praying, and far away, across stars, across dust clouds, across light years of darkness, something stirred, something powerful, something ancient, something built for survival and shaped by danger. Humanity had heard their call and the early situation. The moment before everything changed was now complete. Asterisk, when the Virellan SOS finally reached Terran space, it arrived like a ghost, signal weak, trembling, almost broken by the distance it had traveled. It flickered through static and distortion, moving across relay satellites and communication buoys until it finally reached a Terran monitoring station located on the far edge of human territory. The signal was so faint that most machines would have ignored it, but humans had a habit of checking everything twice. It was part of their nature, ever assume, always verify, always be ready. Onside the monitoring station, a single operator named Lieutenant Mara Jensen was working the night shift. The station floated quietly above a dusty, uninhabited moon. Nothing ever happened there. It was the kind of assignment people got when they wanted peace or were waiting for a transfer. Mara expected nothing but silence during her shift. But then her console beeped softly, a sound so unexpected that she almost spilled her coffee. She leaned forward, tapped the display, and saw the SOS signal trying to break through layers of interference. At first, she thought it was an old, corrupted distress beacon left behind by some forgotten satellite. But when she cleared the static and adjusted the frequencies, the message finally became clear enough to play. The screen went dark for a second, then lit up with the image of a terrified Virellan counselor, his glowing skin dimmed with fear. His voice trembled as he described the attack. Behind him, the video showed families crying, lights flickering and alarms blaring. Mara froze. For a moment she didn't breathe. Then she whispered, "Oh God, humans." I had seen distress calls before, but this one felt different. It wasn't a military vessel under attack. It wasn't a lost explorer. It wasn't a damaged cargo ship. This was an entire species begging for help off peaceful people with no defenses, no army, no way to protect themselves. Mara immediately forwarded the signal to Central Command. Within minutes, the emergency alert spread across the Terran network. It flashed in the offices of admirals, on the screens of diplomats, inside training academies, and across the Terran military grid. The message lit up the entire system like a spark falling into dry grass. At Central Command, the message played again and again. Generals and admirals gathered around the display. They watched the Virellan children crying. They listened to the trembling voices. They saw the shadows of pirate ships covering the skies, and something inside every human watching shifted from shock to anger. Humans hated bullies, they hated cruelty, and they especially hated seeing innocent people attacked. While discussions erupted inside Central Command, word spread across Terran space. Civilians began to talk about the distress call. Social networks exploded with messages demanding action. News channels replayed the footage constantly. Videos of Virellan families became the top story everywhere. People who had never heard of the Virellans before that day now felt personally connected to them. Humanity had always been emotional, sensitive, and fiercely protective of the helpless. In less than an hour, the Terran president was notified. She watched the message 3 times without speaking. Her advisors waited nervously. Finally, she looked at her military chiefs and said something that would become a historic quote. "No one attacks the helpless while humanity still draws breath. Send the fleet." Across the Terran Federation, alarms activated in bases and spaceports. Massive hangars opened. Soldiers rushed into formation. Engineers sprinted across metal walkways as they prepared enormous warships. Human battle fleets were legendary. They were not built for intimidation, they were built for survival. Every ship carried scars from harsh training environments or previous wars. Every vessel had shields that could withstand sun flares and weapons that shook entire regions of space. The Terran 7th Fleet, the one closest to the Virellan region, was chosen for deployment. It consisted of dozens of warcruisers, carrier ships, destroyers, long-range gunships, and support vessels. And at the heart of it was the pride of humanity, the Titan-class dreadnought, indomitable. A single dreadnought could face entire pirate empires alone. The Karnaks had never seen one this close, and they would not soon forget it. As the fleet mobilized, its communication rooms filled with noise orders, confirmations, trajectory data, weapon checks, medical preparations, and rescue planning. The humans did not simply prepare for war, they also prepared to save lives. Medical ships were attached to the fleet. Human doctors volunteered by the thousands. Engineers loaded emergency supplies. shelters, food, water purifiers, and scanners designed to search for survivors. The mission was dangerous, but humans didn't care. They had already made their decision. Far from the fleet, inside a civilian city on Earth, people gathered in public squares hoping to watch updates. In schools, students whispered to each other about the In cafes, people paused their conversations to stare at holoscreens showing the pirate invasion. Even children asked their parents, "Will we help them?" And the parents always replied, "Of course, we always help." This rising wave of human unity sent a message across the galaxy. Humanity was coming. But while humans prepared, the Virulens endured horrors. Back on the Virulen homeworld, the pirates began their assault. They fired warning shots that struck the outer atmosphere, creating fiery streaks across the sky. The Virulens looked up and saw bright trails of destruction slicing through their once peaceful heavens. Every explosion shook their cities. Windows shattered. Buildings cracked. The glowing forests flickered as if they were frightened too. The pirates hovered above the main city and broadcast a message demanding surrender. But surrender meant slavery. Surrender meant children being separated from parents. Surrender meant chains and cages. The Virulens trembled, but many refused to give in. The council attempted to stall the pirates by pretending to negotiate, hoping for even a few minutes of delay. The Virulen people tried to hide. Families crowded inside shelters deep underground. Elders held hands and whispered soothing songs to the little ones. Some people stared up at the skies, praying for a miracle, wishing for the impossible, wishing for someone strong enough to fight the pirates. But the pirates did not wait long. They began deploying landing ships. Some dropped into forests to capture wildlife. Others landed near villages to seize civilians. Screams echoed across the once peaceful world. The Virulens had no weapons to resist. Their most advanced tool was a harvesting drone used for farming. Their medicated plants were useless against blasters. Their defensive structures were nothing more than decorative barriers. In one village, a Virulen mother named Aaliyah held her two children tightly as the walls around them shook. She whispered, "Someone will come. Someone must come." But even as she spoke the words, she didn't truly believe them. The pirates grew more aggressive. Their landing craft spread like disease across the planet. Some Virulens tried to run into the glowing forests, hoping the thick vegetation would hide them. Others tried to swim into the crystal lakes, holding onto stones to stay underwater as long as possible. But the pirates had heat scanners. They had drones that could track movement. They had dogs bred to hunt fleeing populations. Every hour felt like a lifetime of fear. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, tension grew unbearable. The elders gathered around their communication systems, staring at the screen that displayed the status of their distress signal. It showed that almost all nearby civilizations had ignored them. Only one receiver remained active, the one inside Terran space. But there was no reply yet. No message, no confirmation, nothing. A counselor broke down crying in the middle of the room. Another one slammed her glowing hands on the table, asking why their peaceful nature had cursed them with such vulnerability. The youngest member remained silent, staring at the flickering symbol of Terran space, whispering, "Please answer, please, please answer." Then something unexpected happened. On the Terran flagship Indomitable, the communication officers finally cracked the last layers of distortion in the Virulen S. The message played clearly, without interruption. The human crew members watched silently. Many clenched their fists. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Every person in the room felt the same thing. This could not be ignored. The fleet commander, Admiral Kira Holt, stepped forward. She was known across Terran space for her strength, strategy, and compassion. She studied the message carefully, then looked at her officers with cold determination. "We're going in, full speed." Another officer hesitated. "Admiral, if we push the engines that hard, she'll cut him off. They don't have time. Move." The warships activated their hyperdrives. Blue light swallowed the vessels as they launched into faster-than-light travel. Entire star systems blurred past them. The hum of the engines filled the decks. Human soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots ran simulations. Medical staff rehearsed emergency procedures. Every person on every ship understood the mission: save the Virulens, stop the pirates, and show the galaxy what humanity truly stood for. And while the fleet surged forward, the rumors spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Deathworlders are responding. Humans are moving a fleet. Humanity is going to face the Karnax. Fear spread through pirate networks. Uncertainty spread through neutral factions. Amazement spread through small civilizations that had given up hope. Humanity did not move slowly. Humanity did not hesitate. They reacted with the speed and fury of a species that had evolved to survive. Back on the Virulen homeworld, the pirates prepared for their final assault. They gathered near the largest city with landing ships, ready to break through the last barrier of the Virulen Council. The skies above the city filled with burning engines and dark smoke. Civilians cried. Leaders prayed. Families clung together. But far above them, beyond their sight, beyond their fear, beyond their understanding, a massive energy ripple cut through space. The arrival of the Terran fleet. The humans were close. Very close. And the rising conflict had reached its most dangerous moment. Would help arrive in time. Would humanity be strong enough? Would the virulence survive the next hour? Only the stars knew. Asterisk the moment the signal reached the Deathworlder fleet, something inside every commander tightened. For hours they had been watching the galaxy panic. For hours the other species had debated, argued, and hesitated, but now the truth stood in front of them like a burning line drawn across the stars. That message, broken, full of static, full of fear, had changed everything, and now the time for talking was over. The time for action had arrived. The Deathworlder flagship, Iron Resolve, hummed with a quiet tension. Every hallway buzzed with movement. Engineers sprinted between consoles. Officers reviewed tactical maps so fast that holoscreens flickered from the speed of the updates. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if the ship itself understood what was happening. Outside the armored windows, hundreds of ships hovered in formation, each one a giant piece of floating metal ready to become a weapon. Commander Ralston, known for his calm even in the face of chaos, stood at the center of the bridge. His eyes moved over the incoming data, distress coordinates, intercepted enemy signals, and the deteriorating life signs from the colony. He didn't flinch, but inside his chest, something harsh and hot was building, a deep anger that someone had attacked a peaceful world, and worse, that the galaxy had allowed it to happen around him. His officers waited. They knew the galaxy feared their kind. They knew the word Deathworlder made other species step back. They also knew fear meant hesitation, and hesitation now could mean thousands of innocent lives lost. So they stood silent, waiting for the order they already felt coming. Ralston's voice finally broke the silence. It was low, steady, and final. Prepare the fleet for full engagement. We enter the system in 12 minutes. The room snapped into motion like a coiled spring released. There were no more doubts. No more waiting for approval from the Galactic Council. No more endless discussions about rules, treaties, or political consequences. Only the mission. Only the SOS that begged for help when no one else listened. As the fleet began charging their jump drives, the galaxy watched. Secret communications flickered between governments. Leaders whispered to each other in fear. The Deathworlders were mobilizing. They were sending their war fleet, the same fleet, known for ending wars in days instead of years. The same fleet feared not for cruelty but for unmatched capability. To the other species, it felt like a storm was coming, a storm they could not stop. On the colony itself, things were collapsing fast. Smoke rose from burning structures. Families hid in underground shelters, praying the barriers would hold. The enemy ships circled above like hungry predators, firing in controlled patterns meant to destroy defenses slowly, as if enjoying the suffering below in one of those shelters. A small group of survivors gathered around a flickering screen. It showed the sky outside dark, cracked by streaks of red fire. Among them was a young technician named Failer. His job earlier that day had been maintenance on communication towers. He never imagined he would end up sending the SOS that reached the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He wasn't even sure if it had been the right decision. Some said the Deathworlders were too violent, too unpredictable. Some said their arrival might make things worse, but now, as he heard the explosions getting closer, he whispered to himself, please, let them come. On the enemy command ship, the invaders remained confident. They had crushed countless weak colonies before. They believed this one would fall just as easily. Their commander stood with a smugness that sickened even his own officers. He believed fear was a stronger weapon than any fleet, and he believed the galaxy was too scared of the Deathworlders to ever request their help. But he didn't know the message had reached them. He didn't know the Deathworlders had already decided. He didn't know 12 minutes was all he had before everything changed. Back on Iron Resolve, countdown timers glowed red. 10 minutes, 9-8. Each passing second tightened the atmosphere. The crew moved with perfect synchronization. No shouting, no panic, just silent, focused urgency. Deathworlders didn't enjoy war. They hated it, but they were built for survival on the harshest world known to the galaxy, and that had forged them into something unstoppable. Commander Ralston received a live feed from the colony defense chief, an exhausted woman covered in dust and burns. She didn't waste time on greetings. We don't have long, she said, her voice shaking. They're breaking through the main shield. If they breach it, the shelters won't withstand the attack. We've lost almost everything. You held out long enough for us to reach you, Ralston replied quietly. Your people won't be abandoned. Her eyes filled with tears but also relief. Thank you, she whispered. Then the transmission cut. 7 minutes. The bridge lights dimmed as the ship's massive engines pulled energy toward the jump core. A low rumble spread through the floors. The fleet around them shifted formation, falling into battle-ready positions with flawless precision. The darkness of space pulsed with the quiet blue glow of charging reactors. Finally, the comms officer spoke. All ships report ready. Ralston straightened. His expression hardened into something sharp and unshakable. The galaxy often confused this expression with aggression, but for Deathworlders it meant something else, a promise. A promise that those who preyed on the innocent would not do so without consequences. Activate the fleet-wide channel, he ordered. All crew members paused. Every pilot, every engineer, Every soldier listened as his voice echoed across hundreds of ships. We have received a call for help from those who had no one else to turn to. They reached for us because the rest of the galaxy feared what we are capable of. But fear does not decide who we are. Today, we show them what Deathworlders truly stand for. Prepare for insertion. We protect the innocent. We do not hesitate. And we do not fail. The channel fell silent. 3 minutes. On the colony, another explosion shook the ground. The outer shield cracked like glass. Screams echoed in the shelters. Phaler covered his ears as dust fell from the ceiling. He looked at the sky screen and whispered again, "Please, please be close." The invader commander smiled darkly. "Finish it." 1 minute. Ralston raised his hand in a final command. "Jump." In a blinding instant, the entire fleet vanished into the fold of space. For 2 heartbeats, the galaxy held its breath. Then, above the burning colony, hundreds of massive Deathworlder warships tore out of hyperspace like thunder ripping open the sky. Their arrival shook the atmosphere. The clouds rippled outward. The ground vibrated as if the world itself gasped. The enemy fleet froze. Their scanners exploded with alarm. They had not expected this. They had never faced anything like this. The Deathworlders didn't wait. The first volley of fire streaked through the darkness, bright, sharp, and devastating. Energy beams lanced into enemy ships with surgical precision. Explosions spread across the sky like blooming flowers of light. The invader formation shattered instantly. In the shelters, survivors watched with wide eyes as the dark sky suddenly filled with blinding brilliant light, so powerful it erased smoke and fear for 1 instant. Phaler felt his breath catch. He didn't understand what he was seeing at first, but then he whispered, "They came." Commander Ralston stood at the front of the bridge as his ship fired again and again, carving through enemy forces with overwhelming force. His eyes were cold, steady. There was no anger now. Only focus, only duty. The enemy commander screamed orders, but it was too late. His fleet was collapsing. His confidence evaporated. He stared at the sudden storm of death, firepower, and realized too late that he had triggered something far larger than what could ever control. The battle had turned in seconds. The breaking point had arrived. Not for the Deathworlders, but for the invaders who believed the galaxy's fear of humanity would protect them. Now, that fear had turned into the very storm destroying them, and the entire galaxy watched, stunned, as the Deathworlder fleet unleashed its full might, not in conquest, but in defense of the helpless. The moment the Deathworlder fleet entered the colony's orbit, everything changed. The enemy ships that had been circling confidently only minutes earlier now scattered like frightened insects. The sky, which had been filled with red flames and falling debris, suddenly lit up with bright streaks of blue and silver as Deathworlder ships moved into formation. Their engines glowed like burning stars, their metal hulls reflecting the chaos beneath them. To the people on the ground, it looked like an entire new sky had arrived, a sky made of power, precision, and hope. Inside the colony shelters, everyone stared at the screens in disbelief. Phaler couldn't breathe for several seconds. He saw giant shapes cutting through the atmosphere, heard the rumble of weapons shaking the earth, and felt the vibration of explosions far above. But this time, the explosions weren't destroying their homes. They were destroying the enemy. They were protecting the defenders who had almost given up. The colony's defense chief, who had been preparing for the worst, suddenly froze as the monitors filled with updates. Enemy positions wiped out, shield reinforcements restored, civilian zones marked safe for the moment. She felt her knees weaken, and she leaned against a console, overwhelmed. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had arrived like a storm that refused to lose. In space, the battle moved faster than anything the colony or the enemy had ever seen. The Deathworlders didn't waste time with dramatics or threats. They moved as one enormous machine. Each ship fell into exact positions. Every pilot knew exactly what the others were doing, and every shot fired was calculated to hit its target. They didn't destroy everything blindly. They targeted engines, weapons, command centers. They moved with a kind of cold focus that came not from cruelty, but from experience. They had survived a world that tried to kill them every day. Fighting a fleet of invaders was simply another challenge. Commander Ralston stood at the center of the bridge, his eyes fixed on rotating holograms of enemy ship positions. His voice was steady as he gave orders: shift formation, cut off their retreat, disable their carriers, protect the colony perimeter. His officers executed commands without hesitation. On the screens, the invader fleet shrank as ship after ship fell. Some exploded instantly, others drifted in silence with their engines dead, lights flickering. A few tried to flee, but the Deathworlders blocked every escape route like a tightening net. The enemy commander watched in horror from his bridge. His pride had vanished. All that remained was fear. He had believed the Deathworlders were too dangerous to get involved. He had believed their reputation would keep them silent. But now he stood on his failing ship, watching his fleet collapse in front of his eyes. Every alarm bled. Every officer panicked. The ship's walls trembled from impacts. "How are they doing this?" he shouted. "We outnumber them." But numbers didn't matter. Skill, strategy, and discipline did. And the Deathworlders had all three. sharpened by centuries of surviving on their deadly homeworld. Meanwhile, on the colony below, the shields flickered and then began to stabilize as Deathworlder engineers remotely patched power lines and redirected energy. Defense cannons that had been destroyed earlier suddenly came back to life, firing at enemy fighters. Survivors cheered inside the shelters as they saw signs of recovery. Children cried from relief instead of fear. In one corner of a shelter, an old man started praying softly, thanking whoever had brought the Deathworlders to them. Fela, who had sent the SOS, felt tears in his eyes. He whispered to himself, "We're going to live. We're really going to live." Outside, the Deathworlder ground teams prepared to land. Dropships detached from the larger vessels, descending through burning clouds like armored meteors. Their hulls glowed from atmospheric friction. When they hit the surface, the ground shook, the ramps dropped, and squads of heavily trained Deathworlder soldiers ran out, taking immediate positions around the colony. These soldiers were not like the ones from soft planets. They moved quickly but carefully. Their armor was thick but flexible. Their visors flickered with tactical data. Their weapons were powerful but precise. They scanned every corner, checking for survivors, locating enemy ground forces, and marking safe paths for evacuation. One of the soldiers found a crushed building where people were trapped under debris. With strength that seemed impossible for one person, he pushed aside giant slabs of concrete. The trapped family stared at him in awe. To them, he looked like a machine-strong, unstoppable.com, even as explosions shook the air. "You're safe now," the soldier said simply, lifting the youngest child and handing them to a medic. More teams spread out. They repaired power relays. They secured streets. They neutralized leftover enemy drones. Everywhere they went, the colony people watched them in amazement. Some had feared the Deathworlders for their reputation. But now, seeing them risk their lives to rescue strangers changed everything. In orbit, the battle was nearing its end. Commander Ralston watched as the last enemy ship attempted to escape by diving into the planet's atmosphere. It was a desperate move, and it wasn't going to work. He gave a single nod. "Disable it." Two interceptor ships broke formation and shot forward. A precise burst of energy hit the fleeing vessel's rear thrusters. The enemy ship spiraled out of control, falling toward the ocean, where it crashed with a distant boom that echoed across the colony. The sky finally began to clear. Smoke parted. The bright glare of Deathworlder engines dimmed. The battlefield grew quiet, except for the soft crackling of burning wreckage in the distance. The invader commander, his ship half destroyed, stared blankly at the destruction around him. His fleet, once proud, once undefeatable, was gone. His officers lay injured or unconscious. His screens flickered with warnings. He whispered, "This cannot be real." Then his ship lost power completely and drifted silently into the darkness. Ralston let out a slow breath. The hardest part was over, but the mission wasn't finished. He turned to his officers, but again full sweep of the area. "It aid every survivor. Secure the planet. Make sure no enemy escapes." "Yes, sir." Down on the colony, people began emerging from shelters. Their eyes widened as they saw Deathworlder soldiers distributing medical supplies, guiding children, lifting rubble, and setting up temporary power stations. The fear that had lived inside their hearts for hours slowly faded. For the first time since the attack began, there was real sunlight shining through the smoke. Failer stepped outside with shaky legs. He looked up at the massive ships floating above, their metallic bodies glowing softly in orbit. He felt tiny, but also safe. He walked toward a group of Deathworlder engineers repairing a communications tower. One of them noticed him and asked, "Are you the one who sent the distress signal?" Failer swallowed. "Yes, I didn't know if it would reach you." The engineer smiled beneath his helmet. "It reached us, and you did the right thing." Failer felt warmth spread through his chest. Someone had believed in his message. Someone had answered. Across the colony, rescue operations continued. Medical drones scanned for survivors. Deathworlder scientists checked water and air levels for contamination. Ground crews created temporary shelters for families whose homes were destroyed. And everywhere, the Cohones people watched with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Later, Commander Ralston landed on the surface to meet with the defense chief. She approached him with exhaustion in her eyes but also pride. She saluted him deeply. "You saved us," she said simply. Ralston shook his head. "No, you saved yourselves. You fought until we could arrive. We only finished the fight." The chief smiled, understanding the respect behind his words. She knew he wasn't trying to take credit. He was reminding her that her people were strong too. As they spoke, children shyly approached Deathworlder soldiers, offering small handmade thank you gifts, flowers, drawings, pieces of cloth with hopeful symbols. The soldiers accepted them gently, some even kneeling so the children could place gifts in their hands. To the survivors, these warriors were not monsters. They were protectors. They were the ones who came when no one else did. Finally, as the sun began to set, the colony lights flickered back to life. Power stations rebooted. Water systems restarted. The first signs of normal life began to appear again. The Deathworlders had not only won the battle, they had restored hope. And as the galaxy watched from afar through news broadcasts, intercepted feeds, and reports, it slowly realized something important. The Deathworlders were not the destroyers they had always feared. They were the defenders no one else could match. The rescue of the colony became a symbol, a turning point, a reminder that strength, when used with purpose, could protect rather than harm. And the Deathworlders, without asking for praise or reward, continued their work until every survivor was safe and every threat was gone. Their mission was simple: protect the innocent. And in that moment, the galaxy finally began to understand who the Deathworlders truly were. When the battle was finally over and the smoke in the sky began to thin, the colony slowly started to understand what had happened. Hours earlier they had been trapped between fear and destruction, convinced they had no future left. But now, as the harsh sounds of explosions faded into the distance, a strange kind of quiet settled over the land. It was a quiet that felt peaceful, almost unreal. The people stepped out of their shelters and looked around as if waking from a nightmare they still weren't sure was over. The burned streets, the broken buildings, the fallen trees, everything looked different. But among all the destruction, there were signs of hope. Deathworlder soldiers moving calmly, engineers repairing vital equipment, medical teams helping the injured. It felt like the colony had just been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Phaler stood in the open for the first time since the attack began. He took a deep breath and felt the cool air fill his lungs, something he hadn't expected to experience again. The sky was still stained with gray smoke, but he could now see patches of blue peeking through. He stared up at the massive Deathworlder ships floating above, their metallic surfaces reflecting the sunlight. They looked like guardians still watching over them, ready to act if anything happened again. It was comforting in a way he never imagined possible. People began walking through the streets, searching for lost family members, checking on friends, helping strangers. The Deathworlders guided them gently, directing them away from dangerous areas and toward safe zones. Families were reunited, often bursting into tears and clinging to each other as if they would never let go again. Every hug, every shout of relief, every smile carried the weight of survival. For many, the simple fact that they were still alive felt like a miracle. In the command tent set up near the center of the colony, Commander Ralston stood with the defense chief reviewing the damage reports. There was a heaviness in the air, not from fear anymore, but from the reality of what the colony had lost. Entire neighborhoods were gone, power grids destroyed, farmlands burned. But the chief looked at Ralston with determination. "We can rebuild," she said quietly. "It will take time, but we can." Ralston nodded. "You have strong people, stronger than you realize." She appreciated the words. Coming from a Deathworlder, they meant something real. Strength was a language the Deathworlders understood better than anyone. Outside, a group of children gathered around a Deathworlder soldier who had taken off his helmet. They looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. To them, he was not a frightening warrior. He was someone who had arrived out of nowhere and saved their lives. One child handed him a small drawing, a picture of a large starship above a smiling colony. The soldier paused before accepting the drawing with a gentle smile. Even he, hardened by years of battle, felt his chest tighten. "Thank you," he said softly. The children giggled and ran off, leaving him staring at the drawing as if it were the most precious thing he had ever been given. As the hours passed, the Deathworlders continued working. They cleared rubble, repaired communication towers, set up temporary housing, and worked with colony engineers to stabilize damaged structures. Their movements were efficient, controlled. There was no sense of superiority, no arrogance. They were simply doing what they had come to do: protect and help. And the colony started to see them in a new light. News from other worlds began to spread. The Galactic Council received countless reports of the event. For decades, the galaxy had whispered fearful stories about the death. Some claimed they were too violent. Others said they were unpredictable, dangerous, destructive. Many governments taught their people to avoid them at all costs. But now, images of Deathworlder soldiers rescuing children, repairing energy lines, and lifting rubble with bare hands were being shared across worlds. For the first time, the galaxy saw not a threat, but protectors. In political chambers, some leaders argued that the Deathworlders were still too dangerous to trust, but others spoke differently. They pointed at the live footage of the colony, Deathworlders carrying injured civilians, rebuilding homes, working tirelessly through the night. This was not the behavior of conquerors. This was the behavior of allies. The survivors of the colony volunteered to speak publicly. The defense chief gave a recorded message that spread across dozens of planets. Her voice was firm but filled with emotion. "They came when no one else did," she said. "They answered a call that others ignored. They saved thousands of lives. We will never forget this." Phaler was also asked to speak. His message was simpler, but just as powerful. "I thought no one would hear my signal, but they did, and because of them, we're alive." These messages affected millions. They opened old wounds and healed new ones. They forced many to rethink what they believed. While the galaxy debated, the Deathworlders themselves focused only on their work. They had no interest in politics. They didn't care who praised them or who feared them. Their mission was not about reputation. It was about survival. Other survival. Commander Ralston took a walk through the colony's remains once repairs had stabilized the area. He looked at the burned houses, the shattered windows, the empty playgrounds where children had once played. It was always the same after a rescue mission, a bittersweet sadness. Lives had been saved, but many others had been changed forever. War always left scars. Failer approached him hesitantly. "Commander," he asked softly. Ralston turned, and Failer gathered the courage to continue. "I wanted to thank you. Truly, I didn't know what else to do when I sent that message. I didn't even know if I was doing something dangerous by contacting but you came." Ralston studied the young man for a moment before replying. "You did what any brave person would do. You asked for help when there was no one else to ask." Failer exhaled shakily. "Will you stay? I mean, until everything is safe." "We'll stay as long as we are needed," Ralston said. "We don't abandon those who ask for our help." That answer alone gave Failer more comfort than any rebuilding plan. Over the next days, the colony began to recover. Power returned to more districts. Food and water stations expanded. Deathworlder scientists helped restore farmland using their advanced tools. Children started playing again, using the open fields as playgrounds. Laughter began to replace fear, slowly but surely, and something else happened, something surprising. The colony people and the Deathworlders started forming bonds, not just temporary alliances, but genuine friendships. A Deathworlder mechanic taught local engineers how to strengthen metal supports using materials they had never seen before. A Deathworlder medic shared first responder techniques with the colony doctors. One Deathworlder soldier even helped rebuild a small school. Working alongside teachers and parents, each shared task softened old misconceptions. The galaxy watched all of this, in silence at first, but soon, messages began arriving from other planets. Offers for cooperation, invitations for dialogue, requests for help in understanding Deathworlder technology. The change was slow, but real. One single act of rescue had started a chain reaction across countless worlds, and at the center of that change stood one colony that had almost been erased. Late one evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky turned a warm orange, Failer climbed a small ridge overlooking the main settlement. He sat there quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. The fear, the hopelessness, the moment he sent the and the moment he realized the Deathworlders had answered. Commander Ralston joined him, standing beside him without speaking. The two looked out at the glowing lights of the colony. "It's beautiful," Failer whispered. "It is," Ralston agreed. "This is why we fight. Not for glory, not for power, for life. For places like this." Failer nodded. For the first time, he understood something many others in the galaxy had misunderstood for years. The Deathworlders were not dangerous because they wanted to destroy. They were dangerous because they refused to let destruction win. They were powerful because they had been shaped by struggle, and they used that power to protect others from suffering the same fate. As the night deepened and stars lit the sky, the colony lights shimmered like small diamonds. The battered world was healing, and it would continue to heal. Because hope had returned, the Deathworlders eventually prepared to leave. Their mission completed, the colony gathered to see them off. Children waved drawings. Adults offered food, thanks, and heartfelt words. Tears flowed freely, not from fear, but from gratitude. Before boarding the flagship, Commander Ralston turned to the crowd and spoke simply. "If you ever need us again," he said, "we will come." And the people believed him. When the Deathworlder fleet lifted into the sky and disappeared into the stars, a quiet pride settled over the colony. They had survived the impossible, and they had met a truth the galaxy had long ignored. The Deathworlders were not monsters, they were guardians. And from that day forward, the galaxy would never see them the same way again.